The ex-husband brought his new wife, unaware that the mafia boss would appear and kiss his ex-wife in front of everyone, leaving the entire wedding in stunned silence. Just before we start, this community spans every continent. Drop your city's name if you feel comfortable sharing. The late afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of Elena Morrison's restoration studio, casting golden shadows across centuries-old paintings that waited patiently for her skilled hands to breathe life back into them. She stood before a particularly challenging piece, a Renaissance portrait whose colors had faded with time, its subject's face nearly lost to the years of neglect and improper storage. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, the fine brush barely touching the canvas as she worked to reveal what had once been vibrant crimson in the subject's dress. This was her sanctuary, the one place where the chaos of her personal life couldn't touch her. Here, surrounded by the whispers of history and the smell of linseed oil and varnish, she was in complete control. Perfect, she murmured to herself, stepping back to examine her progress. The transformation was subtle but significant, each careful stroke revealing more of the artist's original intention, more of the beauty that time had tried to steal away. Her phone buzzed on the work table, shattering her concentration. Elena hesitated before picking it up, knowing that any interruption to her work usually brought unwelcome news. The screen displayed a message from her former friend Caroline, someone she'd once considered close until her divorce had revealed who truly stood by her side. "Thought you should know. Marcus will be at the Grandview Gala next week with her. Just wanted to warn you in case you were planning to attend." Elena's jaw tightened. Marcus. Her ex-husband. The man who'd promised to support her dreams, who'd sworn that her passion for art restoration was something he admired, something that made her special. Until it didn't. Until a 23-year-old Instagram influencer with millions of followers and an apartment full of designer handbags had caught his attention at a charity event. The divorce had been swift and brutal. Marcus, a successful real estate developer, had made sure everyone in their social circle knew that Elena had been too focused on dead painters and dusty canvases to be a proper wife, that she'd chosen her career over him, that she was, in his words during their final argument, boring and stuck in the past. She set the phone down without responding, but the damage was done. The Grandview Gala. Of course, Marcus would be there. He never missed an opportunity to network with the city's elite. And of course, he'd bring Madison, his new girlfriend, who documented every moment of their picture-perfect life for her 3 million followers. Elena returned her attention to the Renaissance portrait, but her hands weren't as steady now. She set down her brush with a frustrated sigh. 5 months since the divorce had been finalized, and Marcus still had the power to shake her foundation. She hated it. Hated that he'd taken not just their marriage, but also her confidence, her social standing, and worst of all, her belief that she was enough. A sharp knock on the studio door pulled her from her thoughts. Elena wasn't expecting anyone. She rarely was these days. Most of her clients communicated through email or phone, sending their precious artworks through secure courier services. "Come in," she called, wiping her hands on her work apron. The door opened to reveal a man who seemed to command the very air around him. Tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, with dark hair swept back from a face that was both dangerously attractive and utterly intimidating. But it was his eyes that held her frozen, dark, calculating, missing nothing as they swept across her modest studio before settling on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. 2 other men flanked him, standing at attention just outside the door. Bodyguards, she realized with a jolt of unease. Their hands rested casually at their sides, but something about their posture suggested they were ready for anything. "Miss Morrison," the man said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey and just as intoxicating. "I hope I'm not interrupting." No, I mean, yes, but..." Elena straightened, trying to regain her composure. "I don't take walk-in appointments. All consultations are scheduled in advance." A slight smile curved his lips, more dangerous than warm. "I'm aware. However, I find that some matters require a more personal approach. He stepped inside, and Elena noticed how the space seemed to shrink around his presence. This wasn't a man accustomed to hearing the word no. Everything about him screamed power, control, danger. I'm looking for someone with very specific skills, he continued, moving slowly around her studio, examining the paintings in various stages of restoration with what appeared to be genuine interest. Someone who can work with Renaissance pieces, someone discreet, someone whose talent exceeds their reputation, which is saying something, given what I've heard about you. And you are? Elena asked, finding her voice though her heart hammered against her ribs. He turned to face her fully, and something flickered in those dark eyes. Amusement, perhaps, or assessment. You can call me Dominic. Dominic Castellano. The name hit her like a physical blow. Everyone in the city knew that name, even if they pretended not to. Dominic Castellano was the subject of whispered conversations, of news articles that never quite said what everyone knew to be true. He controlled the city's underground with an iron fist. Businesses that refused his protection mysteriously burned down. Rivals who challenged him simply disappeared. The police couldn't touch him. Whether because they couldn't find evidence or because enough of them were on his payroll was a matter of speculation. Elena's studio suddenly felt impossibly small. Mr. Castellano, I'm not sure what you've heard, but I run a legitimate restoration business. I can't be involved in anything questionable. He finished for her, that dangerous smile returning. I'm not asking you to. I have acquired a painting, legally, I assure you, that requires the touch of a master restorer. It's a Caravaggio, or rather, attributed to Caravaggio. I need someone who can determine its authenticity and, if genuine, restore it to its original glory. A Caravaggio. Elena's professional interest warred with her survival instinct. Caravaggio was one of the masters, his works incredibly rare and valuable. The chance to work on such a piece was the opportunity of a lifetime. But accepting a commission from Dominic Castellano meant stepping into a world she'd carefully avoided her entire life. I'd need to see the piece first, she heard herself say, and immediately wanted to take the words back. What was she thinking? Naturally. Dominic reached into his jacket. Elena tensed, but he only produced a business card, black with silver lettering. No company name, just a phone number. Call this number tomorrow evening. My people will arrange for the painting to be brought here, to your studio, under appropriate security. You examine it, give me your professional assessment, and we discuss terms. Simple. He held out the card. Elena stared at it for a long moment before taking it, careful not to let their fingers touch. The cardstock was heavy, expensive. Like everything else about him. Why me? She asked quietly. There are other restorers in the city, more established ones, people who work with museums and who talk, Dominic interrupted smoothly. Who have boards to answer to, committees to consult, lawyers who ask inconvenient questions. I need someone independent, someone brilliant, someone who needs this as much as I need them. The last phrase hung in the air between them. Elena's cheeks flushed. Did he know about Marcus? About her social exile? About how desperate she was to prove that she was more than just a divorced woman who'd been cast aside for someone younger and shinier? Think about it, Dominic said, moving toward the door. But don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't wait forever. He paused at the threshold, looking back at her one final time. And Miss Morrison? That invitation to the Grandview Gala you've been avoiding responding to? I suggest you accept it. Some things are better faced head-on. Trust me. I know about confronting your past. Then he was gone, his bodyguards falling into step behind him, leaving Elena standing in her studio with a black business card and a racing heart. How did he know about the gala invitation? How much did this dangerous man know about her life? She looked down at the card in her hand, then at her phone where Caroline's warning still glowed on the screen. Two paths stretched before her. The safe one, decline Dominic Castellano's offer, skip the gala, continue her quiet existence, rebuilding her reputation one restoration at a time. And the dangerous one. Step into a world that both terrified and inexplicably thrilled her. Elena walked to her work table and carefully set the black card beside her tools. The Renaissance portrait seemed to watch her with knowing eyes, a woman from another century who'd probably faced her own impossible choices. Tomorrow evening. She had until tomorrow evening to decide whether to make the call that might change everything. Outside her studio windows, the sun continued its descent, painting the city in shades of amber and crimson. Somewhere in that city, Dominic Castellano moved through shadows she'd never seen, wielding power she couldn't imagine. And somehow, impossibly, their worlds had just collided. Elena picked up her brush again, but her hands trembled too much to work. For the first time in months, she felt something other than numbness and resignation. She felt alive. Terrified, yes, but alive. And that, she realized with surprise, was exactly what she'd been missing. Elena made the call exactly 24 hours later, her finger hovering over the number on the black card for a full minute before she finally pressed it. The line was answered on the first ring by a voice that was all business, professional, clipped, revealing nothing. Miss Morrison, Mr. Castellano has been expecting your call. The painting will be delivered to your studio tomorrow at 8 p.m. Please ensure you're alone. The line went dead before she could respond. Elena stared at her phone, a chill running down her spine. There was no warmth in that interaction, no room for questions or negotiation. This was Dominic Castellano's world, efficient, controlled, and utterly inflexible. The next evening arrived faster than she'd anticipated. Elena had spent the day preparing her studio, setting up proper lighting and her most sensitive authentication equipment. She'd also researched Caravaggio extensively, reviewing his techniques, his signature brushwork, the specific pigments he favored. If this painting was genuine, it would be worth millions, perhaps tens of millions. At precisely 8 p.m., 3 black SUVs pulled up outside her studio. Elena watched from her window as men in dark suits emerged, moving with the coordinated precision of a military unit. They swept the street, checked the perimeter, and only then did Dominic Castellano himself step out of the middle vehicle. He wore a black blazer tonight over a white shirt, the top buttons undone, revealing a gold chain at his throat. Even from her second-floor window, Elena could see the dangerous elegance in the way he moved, every gesture deliberate, every step calculated. This was a man who controlled everything around him, including how people perceived him. 2 men carried a large, flat crate between them, handling it with care that suggested they understood its value. Or perhaps they simply understood what would happen if they damaged something that belonged to Dominic Castellano. Elena buzzed them in, her mouth dry. By the time she opened her studio door, Dominic was already there, his dark eyes sweeping across her workspace with that same assessing look he'd given it before. "Miss Morrison," he said with a slight nod, "thank you for agreeing to see the piece." "I haven't agreed to anything yet," Elena replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I need to examine it first." "Of course." He gestured to his men, who carefully set the crate on her largest work table. With practiced efficiency, they removed the protective outer layer, revealing an inner case lined with climate-controlled packaging. Then they stepped back, and Dominic himself opened the final layer. Elena's breath caught in her throat. Even beneath centuries of grime and deteriorating varnish, she could see it. The dramatic chiaroscuro, the intense emotional realism, the almost violent energy that characterized Caravaggio's work. The painting depicted Judith beheading Holofernes, one of Caravaggio's most powerful and disturbing subjects. But this version was different from the famous one housed in Rome. The composition was similar, but not identical. The expressions more raw, more visceral. "My God," Elena whispered, moving closer. Her professional instincts kicked in, overwhelming her fear. She pulled on cotton gloves and retrieved her magnifying glass and portable UV light. "Where did you get this?" "From a private collection in Eastern Europe." Dominic said, watching her examine the piece with what seemed like genuine interest. The seller's family had held it for generations, hidden during various wars and regime changes. They needed liquid assets quickly. I made them an offer. Elena barely heard him. She was lost in the painting, studying the brushwork, the craquelure pattern in the aged varnish, the way the paint had been applied. Under UV light, she could see evidence of pentimenti, changes the artist had made during the painting process. That was a good sign. Forgers rarely bothered with such details. This could be authentic, she said finally, stepping back. But I'd need weeks to properly authenticate it. Chemical analysis of the pigments, X-ray fluorescence to examine the underlayers, dendrochronology of the wood panel if we're lucky enough that it has one, carbon dating of the canvas fibers. This isn't something I can determine in an evening. I understand. That's why I'm offering you a contract. Dominic moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something expensive and subtly spiced. 6 weeks. Full access to whatever equipment or resources you need. Complete confidentiality. And compensation that reflects both the complexity of the work and the discretion required. He named a figure that made Elena's knees weak. It was more than she'd made in the entire previous year. Possibly more than she'd made in the last 2 years combined. That's too much, she said automatically. That's what the work is worth to me. Dominic's voice was firm. You'll earn every dollar, I assure you. I don't pay for anything I don't value, Miss Morrison, and I value expertise, dedication, and silence. The last word hung in the air like a warning. Elena understood what he was really saying. This work was confidential not just because of the painting's value, but because of who owned it. Because of what questions might be asked about how Dominic Castellano had come to possess a potentially priceless Caravaggio. If it's authentic, what will you do with it? She asked. Does it matter? To me, yes. I won't help you sell a stolen masterpiece on the black market. I won't be part of... I'm going to donate it, Dominic interrupted, his dark eyes meeting hers with unexpected intensity. To the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Anonymously, of course, but I want to know it's genuine before I do. I won't have my name, or rather my anonymous donation, associated with a forgery. Elena stared at him, trying to reconcile this with everything she thought she knew about men like him. You're going to give away something worth millions? I'm going to give away something that belongs in a museum where people can see it, he corrected. I can't exactly hang a Caravaggio in my home without raising uncomfortable questions. And keeping it locked in a vault seems wasteful. Art should be seen, shouldn't it? That's what you believe, isn't it, Miss Morrison? He'd been researching her too, she realized, learning what motivated her, what she valued. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, it sent an unexpected thrill through her chest. I need to think about it, she said, though they both knew she'd already decided. Of course. Dominic checked his watch. Expensive, understated, probably worth more than her car. However, I should mention something. I have 2 tickets to the Grandview Gala this Saturday. I understand you've received an invitation but haven't responded. Elena's heart stuttered. How do you... I know many things, Miss Morrison, including the fact that your ex-husband will be there with his new girlfriend, that several members of your former social circle will be there, and that you've been avoiding confirming your attendance because you're afraid of facing them alone. Heat flooded Elena's cheeks. Shame, anger, and something else she couldn't quite name. That's none of your business. No, Dominic agreed. But consider this. You could arrive alone, give Marcus and his friends the satisfaction of seeing you diminished. Or you could arrive with me, as my guest, as the woman I've hired to authenticate and restore what may be one of the most important art discoveries in years. Why would you do that? Elena demanded. Why would you care about my ex-husband or what anyone at that gala thinks of me? For the first time, something shifted in Dominic's expression. The calculated control slipped just slightly, revealing something almost human underneath. Because I recognize someone who's been underestimated, Miss Morrison. Someone whose value has been overlooked by people too stupid to see what's right in front of them. I built everything I have by recognizing value others missed. Consider it professional courtesy. He reached into his jacket and produced a thick envelope, setting it on her work table beside the painting. Contract and advance payment. Read it carefully. I wouldn't respect you if you didn't. If you choose to accept, sign it and text me at the number you already have. And if you want to attend the gala, let me know by Friday. Either way, my men will return for the painting in 1 hour. You can make your decision after I leave. Dominic moved toward the door, his bodyguards materializing to flank him. But at the threshold, he paused and looked back. For what it's worth, Miss Morrison, your ex-husband is a fool. The man who fails to appreciate a masterpiece when he has one deserves to lose it. Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone with a potentially priceless Caravaggio and an offer that terrified and tempted her in equal measure. She opened the envelope with shaking hands. The contract was surprisingly straightforward. 6 weeks, complete confidentiality, the astronomical sum they'd discussed. There were no hidden clauses about illegal activity, no demands beyond her professional services. Almost disappointingly legitimate, if not for the identity of the client. The advance payment was in cash, crisp hundreds. More money than she'd held in her hands since. Well, since before Marcus had left, freezing their joint accounts and leaving her with legal bills she was still paying off. Elena looked at the painting. Judith's blade was frozen forever at Holofernes's throat, her expression determined, but not cruel. A woman doing what needed to be done, regardless of the cost. She thought about Marcus at the gala, probably already planning how he and Madison would subtly mock her if she appeared. She thought about Caroline and the others who disappeared from her life when she stopped being Marcus Morrison's wife and became just Elena, the art restorer nobody important remembered. She thought about Dominic Castellano's dark eyes watching her examine the Caravaggio, the way he'd called her ex-husband a fool, the genuine interest he'd shown in her work. He was dangerous. Everyone knew that. Men like him destroyed lives without hesitation. His reputation was built on fear and power and things she didn't want to imagine. But he'd also looked at her like she was valuable, not as decoration or social currency, but for what she could actually do, for her skill and expertise. Elena pulled out her phone and found the black card with his number. Her finger hovered over the screen for a long moment. Then she typed, "I'll take the contract. And I accept your invitation to the gala." The response came almost immediately. "Excellent. Car will pick you up at 7 Saturday. Wear something that reminds your ex-husband what he lost." Elena smiled despite herself. She was probably making the biggest mistake of her life, stepping into a world she didn't understand with a man whose reputation should have sent her running. But as she looked at the Judith painting, at the woman who'd chosen action over safety, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Sometimes, she decided, you had to risk everything to remember you were more than what others had made you feel. The black dress had cost more than Elena wanted to admit, but the moment she'd seen it in the boutique window, she knew it was perfect. Elegant, sophisticated, with a neckline that suggested confidence without desperation. The kind of dress that said she'd moved on, that she was thriving, that Marcus Morrison's abandonment had been the best thing that ever happened to her. Even if none of that was entirely true yet. Elena studied her reflection in the full-length mirror of her apartment. Her hair was styled in soft waves, makeup subtle but flawless. Simple diamond earrings, a gift from her grandmother, one of the few pieces of jewelry Marcus hadn't tried to claim in the divorce. She looked good, better than good. She looked like someone who belonged at the Grandview Gala. The intercom buzzed at exactly 7 o'clock. Dominic Castellano, she was learning, was a man for whom precision wasn't just preferred, it was expected. "Miss Morrison, your car is here." The doorman's voice crackled through the speaker. Elena took one final breath, grabbed her clutch, and headed downstairs. She'd expected a limousine, something ostentatious that screamed wealth and power. Instead, a sleek black sedan waited at the curb, understated but undeniably expensive. The driver, one of Dominic's ever-present security detail, opened the rear door with a respectful nod. Dominic sat inside, and Elena's breath caught despite herself. He wore a tailored tuxedo that fit him like it had been created specifically for his body, which, she realized, it probably had been. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and when he looked up at her entrance, those intense eyes swept over her with an appreciation that sent heat flooding through her veins. "You look stunning," he said simply. But there was something in his voice, something warm and genuine beneath the usual control, that made the compliment feel more intimate than it should have. "Thank you," Elena managed, sliding into the seat beside him. The door closed, cocooning them in leather-scented luxury. "You clean up pretty well yourself." A slight smile curved his lips. "I have my moments." He reached beside him and produced a slim black box. "Before we arrive, I have something for you." Elena eyed the box warily. "Mr. Castellano, I don't think—" "Dominic," he interrupted. "If we're attending this gala together, you should call me Dominic. And this isn't what you think." He opened the box, revealing a stunning necklace, delicate gold chain with a single pendant that made Elena gasp. It was a miniature masterpiece, a tiny enameled reproduction of Caravaggio's Judith beheading Holofernes, exquisitely detailed despite its small size. The artistry was breathtaking. "I can't accept this," Elena whispered, even as her fingers itched to touch it. "It's not a gift," Dominic clarified. "It's a loan. For tonight only. I acquired it years ago from an estate sale, 18th century Italian work. I thought it appropriate, given our current project together. Consider it. Armor for the battlefield you're about to enter." Elena met his eyes, seeing the understanding there. He knew what this evening meant to her, what she was about to face. This wasn't about buying her favor or her compliance. This was about giving her something to hold on to, a reminder of her worth and expertise. "Turn around," he said softly. Elena hesitated, then complied, lifting her hair. She felt his fingers against the nape of her neck as he fastened the delicate clasp, his touch surprisingly gentle for a man whose hands had undoubtedly done terrible things. A shiver ran down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. "Perfect," Dominic murmured, his breath warm against her skin for just a moment before he pulled back. "Now you're ready." The Grandview Hotel was ablaze with lights when they arrived, a parade of luxury vehicles discharging elegantly dressed guests at the red-carpeted entrance. Elena felt her courage waver as the car pulled up. Somewhere inside that building, Marcus was already holding court, Madison on his arm like a trophy. Dominic must have sensed her hesitation. "Elena," he said, and it was the first time he'd used her first name. "Look at me." She turned to face him, finding his dark eyes steady and certain. "You are brilliant at what you do," he said quietly. "You restore beauty that others have damaged or neglected. You see value where others see only decay. That makes you remarkable. Whatever happens in there, whatever petty comments or looks you receive, remember that you are the one with real talent, with real substance. Everything else is just noise." Elena felt tears prick her eyes but blinked them back. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Say exactly what I need to hear." His smile was slight but genuine. "I recognize quality, Miss Morrison, in art and in people. It's kept me alive this long." The door opened. Dominic stepped out first, then offered his hand to help her emerge. The moment her heels touched the red carpet, Elena felt the shift. Heads turned, conversations paused. She could practically hear the collective intake of breath as people recognized her, and more importantly, recognized who stood beside her. Dominic Castellano didn't often attend high society events. When he did, everyone noticed. His hand settled at the small of her back, proprietary but protective as they walked toward the entrance. Elena kept her head high, her expression serene, even as she felt dozens of eyes tracking their progress. Inside, the ballroom was spectacular. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors. String quartet music floated through air perfumed with hundreds of roses. And everywhere, the city's elite mingled in their designer gowns and bespoke tuxedos, trading gossip and business cards with equal enthusiasm. Elena spotted Marcus almost immediately. He stood near the bar with Madison, who wore a dress that seemed composed primarily of strategic cutouts and social media appeal. Marcus was laughing at something, his hand possessive on Madison's waist, performing his happiness for their audience. Then he saw her. Saw them. His laughter died mid-breath, his face going through a rapid succession of expressions. Surprise, confusion, and something that looked almost like fear when his gaze landed on Dominic. "That's him?" Dominic asked quietly, following her line of sight. "Yes." There was a wealth of assessment in that single sound. Disappointing. I'd expected someone more. Formidable. Despite her nerves, Elena felt a smile tug at her lips. "He seemed formidable once, but I think I was looking at him through the wrong lens. And now? Now I see him clearly." Elena turned away from Marcus, deliberately dismissive. "He's not worth the energy." "Good." Dominic guided her toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. "Would you like champagne?" "God, yes." He signaled a passing waiter with the barest gesture, the kind of minimal movement that nevertheless commanded immediate attention. Elena accepted a flute, grateful for something to do with her hands. They were approached almost immediately by a silver-haired man Elena recognized as Robert Chen, one of the gala's primary sponsors and a prominent art collector. "Dominic," Chen said with careful warmth, "what a pleasant surprise. I didn't expect to see you here this evening." "Robert." Dominic's nod was polite but reserved. "I'm here with Miss Elena Morrison. She's currently working on a very special project for me." Chen's eyebrows rose with interest as he turned to Elena. "Morrison? The restoration specialist? I've heard excellent things about your work. You handled that Vermeer for the Hastings collection, didn't you?" "I did," Elena confirmed, surprised he knew her work. "It was a challenging piece, but very rewarding." "I can imagine." Chen's eyes gleamed with genuine enthusiasm. "I have a few pieces that could use expert attention. Perhaps we could discuss—" "Elena's schedule is fully committed for the next 6 weeks," Dominic interrupted smoothly. "But after that, I'm sure she'd be happy to review your collection." It was a claim of priority, a subtle assertion of ownership that should have annoyed Elena. Instead, she felt a warm flutter in her chest. Dominic was protecting her time, ensuring she could focus on the Caravaggio without the distraction of other clients angling for her attention. They made their way through the crowd, Dominic introducing her to people she'd only read about in business journals. And every introduction was the same. He presented her as an expert, a specialist, someone whose opinion and skills he valued, not as his date, not as decoration, but as a professional equal. Elena felt herself standing taller, speaking with more confidence. This was what she'd been missing, not just recognition, but respect. The acknowledgement that her years of study and practice had value beyond being Marcus Morrison's wife. "Elena Morrison?" The voice cut through her thoughts like a blade. She turned to find Madison standing there, Marcus hovering awkwardly behind her. Up close, Madison was even younger than Elena had thought. Mid-20s at most, with the kind of dewy, unlined face that came from never having worried about anything more serious than Instagram engagement. "Madison," Elena said evenly, "how nice to see you." "Oh my God, I love your necklace." Madison gushed, either oblivious to or deliberately ignoring the tension. "Is it vintage? I'm doing a whole thing on my channel about sustainable fashion, and vintage jewelry is like, so on trend right now." "It's 18th century Italian enamel work," Elena replied, "on loan for the evening." "From the museum where you work?" Madison asked innocently. "I don't work for a museum. I'm an independent restoration specialist." "Oh." Madison's perfectly glossed lips formed a little pout. "That's so quaint. Marcus said you fixed old paintings or something." Before Elena could respond, Dominic's hand tightened almost imperceptibly at her back. When he spoke, his voice was pleasant, but somehow carried an edge that made Madison take an unconscious step backward. Miss Morrison is one of the foremost experts in Renaissance restoration in the country, he said smoothly. I'm currently paying her a considerable sum to authenticate what may be a previously unknown Caravaggio. Her expertise is neither quaint nor something. It's exceptional. The shift in Madison's expression was almost comical, recognition dawning that she'd just insulted someone under Dominic Castellano's explicit protection. Even someone as young and sheltered as Madison knew that name, knew what it meant. Marcus finally found his voice. Elena, I didn't know you'd be here. Or that you— His gaze flicked nervously to Dominic. That you knew Mr. Castellano. There's quite a lot you don't know about me, Marcus, Elena said calmly. That became abundantly clear during our divorce. Now, Elena, that's not fair. Fair? The word came out sharper than she'd intended. You froze our accounts. You told our entire social circle I'd neglected our marriage for my work. You made me feel small and boring and insufficient. So forgive me if I'm not particularly concerned with your definition of fair. Marcus's face flushed red. Several nearby conversations had paused, people pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. Perhaps, Dominic interjected, his voice cutting through the tension like silk-wrapped steel. We should discuss this elsewhere. Unless you'd prefer to provide entertainment for the entire gala, Morrison. The use of just Marcus's last name, devoid of title or respect, was deliberate and devastating. It reduced him to nothing, just another man whose opinion held no weight. Actually, Elena said, surprising herself with her own boldness, I think we're done here. Marcus, Madison, enjoy your evening. I have much more interesting company. She turned away, feeling Dominic's hand guide her back into the crowd. Her heart hammered against her ribs, adrenaline making her fingers tremble around her champagne flute. That was impressive, Dominic murmured once they were out of earshot. Controlled but firm. You're a quick study. I think I'm going to throw up, Elena admitted. His low laugh surprised her. You won't. You're stronger than you think. But perhaps some air would help. He guided her toward a set of French doors that opened onto a terrace. The cool evening air hit Elena's flushed skin like a blessing. She gripped the stone balustrade, taking deep breaths. I can't believe I just did that, she said. You stood up for yourself. That's not something to regret. Elena turned to look at him. In the moonlight, with the sounds of the gala muted behind them, Dominic seemed almost approachable. The dangerous edge softened, replaced by something more human. Why are you really doing this? She asked. The authentication work, I understand. You want to know what you have. But this? She gestured back toward the ballroom. Coming here, defending me to Madison, making Marcus look small. Why? Dominic was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. I told you, I recognize value others have missed. That's not a complete answer. No, he agreed. It's not. He moved closer, close enough that Elena could see the faint scar along his jawline, likely from some confrontation she didn't want to imagine. The complete answer is that I see myself in you, Elena. Someone who worked to build something real, something that mattered, only to have others dismiss it because it didn't fit their narrow definition of value. That's hard to believe. You're one of the most powerful men in the city. Now, but I wasn't always. His voice carried a weight of memory. I came from nothing, built everything through intelligence and determination, and refusing to accept what others said I deserved. Every room I enter, people see the title before they see the man. They see what I've done, what I'm capable of, and they forget I'm human. And you think that's how people see me? I think people stopped seeing you at all. They saw Marcus Morrison's wife. Then they saw Marcus Morrison's ex-wife. They never bothered to see Elena Morrison, master restorer, brilliant art historian, woman of substance and talent. He reached up, his fingers barely grazing the pendant at her throat. This Judith here. She did what needed to be done. She didn't apologize for being strong. Neither should you. Elena's breath caught. They were standing too close, the moment too charged. Everything she knew about Dominic Castellano screamed danger. He was a man whose reputation was built on fear, whose business dealings existed in shadows, whose very presence made people nervous. But looking into his eyes right now, she didn't see a crime lord. She saw a man who understood what it meant to be underestimated, who recognized her worth when everyone else had overlooked it. "Dominic," she whispered, not sure what she meant to say. The French doors burst open. "Mr. Castellano, we have a situation." One of his security details stood there, his expression tense. Dominic's demeanor shifted instantly, the brief vulnerability vanishing behind cold control. "What kind of situation?" "The Marino family sent representatives. They're asking to speak with you." Something flickered in Dominic's eyes. Calculation, assessment, perhaps a hint of annoyance. "Tell them I'm not conducting business tonight." They were, insistent, sir. Dominic's jaw tightened. He turned to Elena. "I need to handle this. It won't take long." "Is everything all right?" Elena asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. "It's fine. Just territorial posturing. Stay here, enjoy the air. I'll return shortly." He looked at his guard. "Marcus stays with her. No one approaches unless I approve it." Then he was gone, disappearing back into the ballroom with that dangerous grace. Elena stood on the terrace, the pendant heavy against her chest, wondering what she'd gotten herself into. Inside, through the glass doors, she could see Dominic speaking with two men in expensive suits. Their body language was tense, aggressive. This was his world, a world of power plays and territorial disputes, of rivals who had to be managed or eliminated. She should be terrified, should be running as fast as her heels would carry her. Instead, she touched the Judith pendant and waited for him to return, her heart racing with something that felt dangerously close to anticipation. Dominic didn't return to the terrace for 20 minutes. When he finally emerged through the French doors, his expression was carefully neutral, but Elena had learned to read the subtle tension in his shoulders, the almost imperceptible tightness around his eyes. "Everything all right?" she asked, though the answer was clearly no. "We should leave." His voice was clipped, professional. The warmth from their earlier conversation had vanished behind walls of control. "Now." Elena didn't argue. Something in his tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. His hand found the small of her back again, but this time the touch was urgent, protective rather than proprietary. They moved through the ballroom quickly, Dominic's security detail materializing around them like shadows. She caught a glimpse of Marcus's confused face as they passed, of Madison's phone raised to capture their hasty departure. Tomorrow, Elena knew, the society blogs would be buzzing with speculation. But right now, that seemed like the least of her concerns. The car was already waiting, engine running. Dominic ushered her inside with barely contained urgency, sliding in beside her as the vehicle pulled away from the curb with practiced speed. "What happened?" Elena demanded once they were moving. "Who were those men?" Dominic was silent for a long moment, his jaw working as he stared out the tinted window. Finally, he turned to face her. "The Marino family. Rivals who've been testing boundaries lately, seeing how far they can push before I push back." "And tonight they pushed?" "Tonight they made it clear they know I was at the gala. With you." His dark eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Which means they now see you as leverage, as something connected to me that they can use to apply pressure." Elena's stomach dropped. "I don't understand. I'm just working on a painting for you." "There's no reason for them to—" "In my world, perception is reality," Dominic interrupted, his voice hard. "I brought you to that gala. I defended you publicly. I made it clear you're under my protection. To people like the Marinos, that makes you valuable. It makes you a potential target." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Elena pressed back against the leather seat, her mind racing. "So what does that mean? What do they want?" They want me to back away from a port development deal they've been trying to control. Territory dispute. Nothing you need to concern yourself with. Dominic ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its perfect styling for the first time that evening. I'll handle it. But until this is resolved, I need to ensure your safety. My safety? Elena's voice rose slightly. Dominic, I'm just an art restorer. I don't have anything to do with your business disputes or territory or... You have everything to do with it now, he said flatly. Because I made the mistake of caring about your humiliation at that gala more than I cared about maintaining strategic distance. Because I let my personal feelings compromise professional judgment. Personal feelings. The words echoed in Elena's mind, sending her heart racing despite the fear. What are you saying? Dominic looked at her for a long moment, something vulnerable flickering in his expression before he shuttered it away. I'm saying you need protection until the Marino situation is resolved. My men will be stationed outside your apartment building. You don't go anywhere without security. Your studio will be monitored, and the Caravaggio work continues, but here. He gestured vaguely at the car's interior. At my estate, where I can ensure nothing happens to you. That's insane, Elena protested. I can't just move into your house. I have a life, clients, responsibilities, which won't matter if you're dead. The bluntness of it stole her breath. Elena stared at him, seeing the genuine concern beneath his controlled exterior. This wasn't manipulation or possessiveness. This was fear. Fear that his choices had put her in danger. How long? She asked quietly. A week. Maybe 2. I'm negotiating with the Marino's leadership, working through intermediaries to resolve this without escalation. But until they agree to back down, you're vulnerable. The car turned down a tree-lined street Elena didn't recognize. Large estates sat behind iron gates and manicured lawns, the kind of neighborhood where privacy was purchased at premium prices. We're going to your house now? Just to discuss security arrangements and show you where you'll be staying. Then my men will take you home to pack essentials. Tomorrow morning, you move to the guest wing. The car pulled through an imposing gate that opened automatically, revealing a circular drive leading to a modern mansion that somehow managed to be both intimidating and beautiful. Glass and stone and clean lines that spoke of wealth without ostentation. Inside, the house was even more impressive. High ceilings, carefully curated art on every wall, furniture that balanced comfort with elegance. But it was the paintings that caught Elena's attention. A small Monet that had to be worth millions, what looked like an authentic Rothko, several pieces she didn't immediately recognize but that screamed quality and taste. You collect, she said, momentarily distracted from the danger discussion. I acquire pieces that speak to me, Dominic corrected, following her gaze. Not for investment, though they serve that purpose too, but because beauty shouldn't be locked in vaults or relegated to storage. It should be experienced. There was something almost sad in his voice, a loneliness that Elena recognized. A man who surrounded himself with beautiful things because the people in his life saw only what he could do for them, not who he actually was. The Caravaggio, she said suddenly. That's why you're really donating it to the museum, isn't it? Because keeping it here, where only you can see it, feels wrong. Wasteful. Dominic's slight smile was answer enough. The guest wing is this way. He led her through the house to a separate section that felt almost like a private apartment. Bedroom, bathroom, sitting area with a workspace already set up. Everything she'd need to continue the restoration work in comfort and safety. The Caravaggio will be moved here tomorrow, Dominic explained. All your equipment and materials as well. My head of security, Vincent, will coordinate with you about schedules and protocols. You'll have complete privacy for your work, but armed guards will be stationed at every entrance. This is really happening, Elena said, more to herself than to him. I'm going into protective custody because I went to a gala with you. I'm sorry. The words came out rough, genuine. This isn't what I intended when I invited you. I thought showing Marcus and his friends that you'd moved on to bigger things would be empowering. Instead, I've put you in danger. Elena turned to face him fully. In the soft lighting of the guest suite, Dominic looked less like the feared crime lord and more like a man carrying the weight of impossible choices. The perfectly styled exterior couldn't quite hide the exhaustion in his eyes, the burden of constant vigilance. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Anything. Do you regret it? Your life, I mean. The choices that brought you here." Dominic was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face as if trying to determine how honest he could be. "Every day," he finally admitted. "And never. I regret what I've had to become, the things I've done to survive and protect what's mine. But I don't regret escaping poverty, refusing to accept the limitations others tried to place on me. I just wish there had been another path to the same destination." "Is there?" Elena asked. "Another path, I mean. Could you ever just walk away? From everything I've built? From the organization, the territory, the reputation?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Men like me don't retire, Elena. We either die in power or we die because we lost it. There's no middle ground, no peaceful exit. That's a terrible way to live. It's the only way I know." He moved closer, close enough that Elena could see the faint stubble along his jawline, smell the subtle spice of his cologne. "But lately, I've been wondering what it would be like. To be someone different. To have the luxury of choosing safety over strategy, personal happiness over organizational necessity." "What changed?" Elena whispered, though she thought she knew the answer. "You," Dominic said simply. "Watching you at that gala, standing tall despite your fear, facing down your ex-husband with dignity and strength, seeing how you transform broken, forgotten art into something beautiful again. You made me remember that there's more to life than power and control, that sometimes the most valuable things are the ones that make you vulnerable." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. They were standing too close again, the air between them charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was insane, falling for a man whose world was built on violence and fear, whose enemies were now potentially her enemies. But looking into his eyes, seeing the loneliness and longing he tried so hard to hide, she couldn't bring herself to care about rational. "Dominic," she started, not sure what she meant to say. His phone buzzed insistently. The spell broke. Dominic stepped back, his expression shuddering as he checked the message. Whatever he read there made his jaw tighten. "The Merinos are moving faster than I expected," he said, his voice turning cold and professional. "Vincent will take you home now. Pack for 2 weeks. Tomorrow morning you move here and you don't leave until I've resolved this situation. Understood?" It wasn't really a question. Elena nodded, feeling the loss of the moment they'd almost had. "And Elena?" Dominic caught her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that was both tender and possessive. "Stay away from your studio tonight. Don't go anywhere predictable. The Merinos are aggressive but not stupid. They'll be watching obvious locations." "You're scaring me," she admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you cautious. Caution keeps you alive." He released her hand, stepping back. "Vincent will stay with you until you're safely in my protection tomorrow. Trust him. He's kept me alive for 15 years. Then he was walking away, already pulling out his phone to make calls that would set plans in motion she couldn't imagine. Elena stood in the beautiful guest suite that was about to become her gilded cage, wondering how her life had transformed so completely in just a few days. A week ago, she'd been alone, heartbroken, struggling to rebuild her reputation one restoration at a time. Now she was under the protection of the city's most dangerous man, caught in a territory dispute between criminal organizations, and falling for someone she had no business wanting. She touched the Judith pendant still at her throat. The warrior woman's blade was forever frozen at her enemy's neck, caught in that moment of terrible decision. Elena understood now why Dominic had chosen this particular piece for her to wear. Because sometimes, survival meant accepting that you'd crossed a line you could never uncross. that the safe path and the right path weren't always the same thing. And sometimes, she was beginning to realize, the most dangerous choice was also the only one worth making. 3 days into her stay at Dominic's estate, Elena had fallen into an unexpected rhythm. Mornings were spent in the guest wing's converted workspace, carefully removing centuries of accumulated grime from the Caravaggio. Afternoons brought consultations with Vincent about security protocols, updates on the Marino situation that told her very little, and quiet dinners alone in her suite. Dominic was conspicuously absent. She'd catch glimpses of him, leaving early in the morning through the main entrance, returning late at night when she was supposedly asleep. But they hadn't spoken since that first night, since that almost moment when he'd admitted she'd changed something in him. Elena told herself it was for the best. That distance was safer, more professional. That getting emotionally tangled with a man whose life was defined by violence and power was a recipe for heartbreak. But every night, lying in the luxurious guest bed, she found herself listening for his footsteps in the hallway, wondering what he was doing, whether he thought about her at all. The Caravaggio, at least, was proving to be authentic. Every test she ran confirmed it. The pigments matched the period, the canvas fibers dated correctly, the underdrawing visible through infrared reflectography showed Caravaggio's characteristic spontaneous changes. This was the real thing. A masterpiece that had been hidden for centuries, now slowly revealing its terrible beauty under her careful hands. Judith's face emerged from beneath the yellowed varnish, resolute and almost sad. Not a monster reveling in violence, but a woman doing what necessity demanded. Elena understood that expression more with each passing day. On the 4th evening, everything changed. Elena was working late, absorbed in removing a particularly stubborn section of overpainting that someone had added in the 19th century, when she heard the commotion. Raised voices, the sound of rapid footsteps, doors slamming. Then Vincent appeared in her workspace doorway, his normally composed face tight with concern. "Miss Morrison, please come with me. Now." "What's happening?" "Mr. Castellano has been injured. He's refusing medical attention until he speaks with you." Elena's heart stopped. Injured how badly? Gunshot wound to the shoulder. Not life-threatening if treated properly, but he's being unreasonably stubborn about it. Vincent's tone suggested this wasn't the first time he'd dealt with his employer's stubbornness. "The doctor is ready, but he won't let anyone treat him until he sees you." Elena didn't remember crossing the house. Suddenly, she was in Dominic's private study, a room she hadn't been invited to before. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture, walls lined with books. And Dominic, sitting in a chair with his shirt partially removed, blood seeping through an improvised bandage on his left shoulder. He looked up when she entered, relief flooding his features. "Elena." "You're all right." "Am I all right?" Elena's voice came out higher than intended. "You're the one who's been shot." "Surface wound. The bullet went through cleanly." He tried to wave dismissively, but winced at the movement. "I needed to make sure the Marinos hadn't made a move on you before I'd deal with this." Elena crossed to him, her fear converting to anger. "You're bleeding all over your expensive furniture because you wanted to check on me first? That's the most idiotic thing I've ever heard." A slight smile crossed his lips despite the pain. "I've been called many things, Miss Morrison. Idiotic is a new one. Stop trying to be charming and let the doctor look at you." Elena turned to find an elderly man waiting patiently with a medical bag. "Please treat him, before he bleeds out from sheer stubbornness." The doctor moved forward with practiced efficiency. Elena meant to leave, to give them privacy, but Dominic's hand shot out and caught her wrist. "Stay, please." So she stayed, standing beside his chair while the doctor cleaned and stitched the wound. Dominic's jaw was tight, but he didn't make a sound, his dark eyes fixed on her face as if she were the only thing keeping him grounded. "What happened?" Elena asked quietly, once the doctor had finished and stepped away to dispose of supplies. The Marinos decided negotiation wasn't working fast enough. They arranged a meeting to discuss terms, then tried to turn it into an ambush. Dominic flexed his shoulder experimentally, testing the bandage. They failed. Most of their people involved in the attempt are no longer a concern. The rest of their organization got the message loud and clear. Elena heard what he wasn't saying. People had died tonight. Dominic had killed them, or had them killed. The violence that always simmered beneath the surface of his controlled exterior had erupted, and men had paid the price. She should be horrified. Should be backing away from this man whose hands were literally stained with blood. Instead, she found herself reaching out to adjust the bandage the doctor had applied, her fingers gentle against his skin. "You could have been killed," she whispered. "But I wasn't." Dominic caught her hand, holding it against his chest where she could feel his heart beating strong and steady. "I'm careful, Elena. I've survived this long because I'm always 3 steps ahead. Except tonight. Tonight I was distracted." His thumb traced patterns on her palm, sending shivers up her arm. "I've been distracted for days, actually. Avoiding you, trying to maintain professional distance, pretending I don't think about you every moment I'm awake." Elena's breath caught. "Dominic!" "I know this is insane," he continued, his voice low and intense. "I know you should run as far from me as possible. That I'm dangerous and damaged and everything about my life is wrong for someone like you. But I can't stop thinking about what you said at the gala. About whether there's another path. Whether I could ever walk away from this." "What are you saying?" Dominic stood, moving closer despite his injury, his free hand coming up to cup her face with surprising gentleness. "I'm saying that for the first time in 20 years I'm considering the impossible. That maybe there's something worth more than power and territory. That maybe preserving beauty is more important than controlling darkness. The Marinos are finished. After tonight's failure, their leadership is scrambling. They'll accept whatever terms I offer just to avoid complete destruction. This territorial dispute is over. You'll be safe again." "So I can go home," Elena said, and was surprised by how much the thought disappointed her. "You could." Dominic's thumb brushed across her cheekbone, his dark eyes searching hers. "Or you could stay. Finish the Caravaggio restoration here. Let me show you that I'm more than just the reputation, more than the violence and fear. Let me prove that underneath all of this, I'm just a man who's falling for a woman he has no right to want." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Every rational thought screamed that this was dangerous, that men like Dominic Castellano didn't change, that she was setting herself up for heartbreak worse than anything Marcus had inflicted. But she remembered his vulnerability at the gala, the way he'd defended her without hesitation, the genuine appreciation he showed for her work, the loneliness in his eyes when he looked at his art collection, the careful gentleness in his touch despite hands that had done terrible things. "I can't promise you forever," she said quietly. "I can't promise this won't terrify me every single day. But I can stay. I can finish the restoration. And I can see who you really are beneath the title everyone fears." Something shifted in Dominic's expression. Hope, relief, hunger, all mixed together. "That's all I'm asking for. A chance to show you I'm worth the risk." He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away. Elena didn't. His lips met hers softly at first, questioning, then deeper as she responded. The kiss tasted of possibility and danger, of choices that couldn't be unmade. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena felt fundamentally changed. "Your shoulder," she started. "Is fine," Dominic assured her, though his wince suggested otherwise. "More than fine, actually. Best I've felt in days." Liar. But Elena was smiling despite herself. "You need rest. Real rest. Not whatever insomnia-fueled work you've been doing for the past 3 days. Only if you promise to have breakfast with me tomorrow. Real conversation. No bodyguards hovering. No business interruptions. Just us. Deal." Elena stepped back reluctantly. "Now go to bed before you pass out and make me feel guilty for kissing an injured man." Dominic's laugh was low and warm. "Yes, ma'am. Though I should mention, I never follow orders this easily." You're a terrible influence on my reputation. Good. Your reputation could use some tarnishing. After Elena returned to her suite, she stood at the window overlooking the estate grounds. Security lights illuminated manicured gardens, and she could see Vincent coordinating additional guards at the perimeter. Even now, even with the Marino threat supposedly ended, Dominic took no chances with her safety. Her phone buzzed with a text from Caroline. OMG, the society blogs are exploding. You at Dominic Castellano's estate? Marcus is losing his mind. Madison posted 15 stories about how some people will do anything for attention. Call me. Elena smiled and turned off her phone without responding. Let them gossip. Let Marcus stew in whatever feelings he was experiencing. None of it mattered anymore. What mattered was the Caravaggio waiting in her workspace, slowly revealing its secrets under her careful restoration. What mattered was the man down the hallway who'd been shot tonight, but had refused treatment until he knew she was safe. What mattered was the impossible choice she'd just made. To stay. To see where this dangerous attraction led. To risk her heart on a man whose world was built on violence, but who looked at her like she was the most precious masterpiece in his collection. Elena touched her lips, still feeling the phantom warmth of Dominic's kiss. Judith stared back at her from the partially restored canvas, blade forever poised at the moment of terrible decision. But Elena had already made her choice. And unlike Judith's frozen moment, this story was still being written. Whether it would end in tragedy or transformation remained to be seen. For now, though, she would stay. She would restore the Caravaggio, and she would discover whether a man built from darkness could find redemption in someone who spent her life bringing light back to forgotten beauty. Tomorrow morning, she would have breakfast with Dominic Castellano. They would talk, really talk, without the weight of immediate danger or professional distance. And maybe, just maybe, they would both discover that the most valuable transformations weren't the ones you could see on canvas. They were the ones that happened to your heart when you were brave enough to let someone see past the damaged exterior to the masterpiece waiting underneath. 6 weeks later, Elena stood in the Metropolitan Museum of Art's private gallery, watching as curators carefully unveiled the restored Caravaggio. The transformation was complete. Centuries of grime and amateur restoration attempts had been painstakingly removed, revealing the master's original work in all its terrible beauty. Judith's face was resolute, her hand steady as she carried out what history demanded. The painting had become something more to Elena than just another restoration. It had become a mirror of her own journey. The courage to do what seemed impossible, to make choices that defied logic but felt absolutely right. It's extraordinary, Doctor. Sarah Chen, the museum's chief curator, breathed beside her. Miss Morrison, this is arguably one of the most significant art discoveries in decades. Your authentication work was impeccable. We're prepared to offer you a permanent consulting position with the museum. Elena smiled, feeling the weight of recognition she'd craved for so long. I'm honored, Dr. Chen, but I prefer to remain independent, though I'd be happy to work with the museum on specific projects. Of course, of course. Dr. Chen's eyes never left the painting. The anonymous donor who's providing this masterpiece to the museum, you're certain they wish to remain completely unnamed? No acknowledgement at all? Completely certain. They believe the art should speak for itself, not be overshadowed by questions about provenance or ownership. What Elena didn't say was that Dominic Castellano couldn't exactly stand beside the painting at a press conference without raising uncomfortable questions, that some gifts were more powerful when given in silence. Well, whoever they are, they've made an incredible contribution to art history. Dr. Chen finally tore her gaze from the Caravaggio. The unveiling ceremony is in 2 hours. Will you be staying for it? I will. Elena glanced at her watch. Though I need to make a call first. She found a quiet corner of the museum and dialed Dominic's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm in a way that still made her heart skip. How does it look? Perfect, Elena said softly. Dominic, you should see the curators' faces. They're stunned. This is going to be the centerpiece of their Renaissance collection. Good. She could hear the smile in his voice. That's where it belongs, where people can experience it the way the artist intended. You could come to the unveiling, stay in the back, see the reaction, and answer questions I can't afford to answer? Dominic's laugh was gentle. No, Elena, this is your moment. You did the work. You deserve the recognition. I'm just the man who was smart enough to hire you. Elena's throat tightened with emotion. Over the past 6 weeks, she'd watched Dominic gradually step back from the more violent aspects of his organization. He was still powerful, still commanded respect and fear, but he'd begun delegating the darker necessities to others, distancing himself slowly, carefully, from the life that had defined him for 2 decades. It wasn't redemption. Not exactly. Men like Dominic Castellano didn't get clean slates, but it was transformation. A man choosing to be more than what circumstances had forced him to become. When will you be home? She asked, then caught herself. I mean, back at the estate. When will you be back? It is home now, Dominic said quietly. At least it's starting to feel like one, since you've been there. A pause. I'll be there by 8. I have something I want to show you. Should I be worried? Only if you're afraid of big decisions. After they hung up, Elena returned to the gallery. The museum staff was preparing for the press unveiling, photographers checking lighting, journalists reviewing their notes. Art historians gathered in excited clusters. This was what she'd always wanted, to be recognized for her expertise, to be valued for her skills rather than her social connections. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Dr. Chen spoke eloquently about the painting's significance, about the mysterious restoration expert who'd authenticated and revealed its glory. Several journalists tried to corner Elena afterward, but she deflected most questions, keeping Dominic's involvement completely anonymous. Marcus was there, she noticed. He stood at the back with Madison, both of them looking uncomfortable among the serious art historians and curators. When their eyes met across the gallery, Elena felt nothing but mild curiosity. The man who'd once had the power to devastate her was now just a stranger with poor judgment and worse taste. She left before Marcus could approach, before the celebration could turn awkward. She had somewhere more important to be. Vincent drove her back to the estate. She still thought of it as Dominic's estate, though increasingly it felt like hers too. The transition had been gradual, her belongings slowly migrating from the guest wing to the main house. Shared dinners becoming routine rather than exception. Mornings waking up in Dominic's bed, his arm protective around her waist. They hadn't discussed the future explicitly. Both of them seemed afraid to name what was happening between them, as if speaking it aloud might shatter the fragile peace they'd built. But tonight, Dominic had said he had something to show her. Something about big decisions. He was waiting in the garden when she arrived, wearing casual clothes, jeans and a dark shirt, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. No bodyguards hovering nearby, though she knew Vincent and his team were never far. How was the unveiling? Dominic asked, pulling her into his arms for a kiss that still made her knees weak after 6 weeks. Perfect. The museum is thrilled. Dr. Chen offered me a permanent position. And you said? That I prefer independence but would consult on specific projects. Elena studied his face, seeing something nervous beneath the usual control. What did you want to show me? Dominic took her hand, leading her through the garden to a building she'd noticed before but never entered. A converted carriage house set apart from the main estate. He unlocked the door, gesturing for her to enter first. Elena stepped inside and gasped. The entire space had been transformed into a state-of-the-art restoration studio. Professional lighting, climate control, every piece of equipment she could possibly need. Work tables, storage for materials, even a small library of reference books. I don't understand, she whispered. It's yours. If you want it. Dominic moved to stand beside her, his hand at the small of her back. Your own private studio. You could work from here, take on whatever clients you choose, have complete control over your projects. Dominic, this must have cost. I don't care what it cost. His voice was intense. Elena, I've been thinking about what you said, about whether there's another path for me. And I realized something. I can't just walk away from everything overnight. The organization, the territory, the reputation, it's too entangled, too complex. But I can change what I am, who I am. Elena turned to face him fully, seeing the vulnerability in his dark eyes. I'm stepping back from active leadership, Dominic continued, transitioning to more of an advisory role, letting my lieutenants handle day-to-day operations while I focus on the legitimate businesses I've been building. It'll take years to fully disentangle myself, but I'm starting the process. Because of me? Because of us. He cupped her face in his hands. Because I've spent 20 years building an empire of fear, and you've shown me something more valuable. You restore broken things, Elena. You see beauty where others see only damage. And somehow, impossibly, you've started restoring me too. Tears pricked Elena's eyes. You're not broken, Dominic. You're just... I am, he interrupted gently. I am broken. I've done things I can never undo, hurt people in ways I can't take back. I'll never be innocent again. But maybe, with you, I can be better than I was. Maybe I can spend the rest of my life building things instead of destroying them. Elena pressed her forehead against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong. This is insane. You know that, right? Art restorer falls for crime lord, he builds her a studio, they live happily ever after. It's not how these stories end. Then let's write a different ending. Dominic tilted her chin up, his eyes searching hers. Stay. Not as my guest or my employee. Stay as my partner. Help me figure out who I can become when I'm not constantly trying to hold on to power through fear. I'm scared, Elena admitted. Good. So am I. But I'm more scared of losing you than I am of changing everything else. Elena thought about the Caravaggio, now hanging in the Metropolitan Museum for the world to see. She thought about Judith's determined expression, a woman making an impossible choice because it was the only choice that mattered. I'll stay, she said quietly, but I have conditions. A slight smile curved Dominic's lips. I'm listening. No more keeping me in the dark about dangerous situations. No more protecting me by shutting me out. We're partners, or we're nothing. Agreed. And you continue stepping back from the violent parts of your organization. I won't love a man who hurts people just to maintain power. I'm already doing that. What else? Elena took a breath. You let me restore you the same way I restore paintings. Slowly, carefully, with patience and trust. Understanding that some damage can't be erased, but it can be revealed as part of a larger, more complex masterpiece. Dominic's eyes glistened with unshed emotion. That's all I'm asking for. Time to prove I'm worth the effort. He kissed her then, deep and thorough, a promise and a plea all at once. When they finally broke apart, Elena looked around the studio he'd built for her. This space that represented belief in their future, investment in something beyond power and control. So what happens now? She asked. Now we take it one day at a time. You work on your restorations. I work on becoming someone worthy of you. We figure out this impossible thing between us. Dominic's smile was genuine, warm. And maybe eventually we stop being so afraid of calling it what it is. Which is? Love, Dominic said simply. Complicated, terrifying, completely irrational love. Elena felt tears slip down her cheeks, but she was smiling. Yeah, that sounds about right. They stood in the studio as evening light filtered through the windows, two damaged people choosing to restore each other. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever was. There would be setbacks and struggles, moments when the weight of Dominic's past threatened to crush their future. But Elena had spent her life bringing beauty back to forgotten masterpieces. She understood that restoration was patient work, requiring dedication and belief that what lay beneath the damage was worth saving. And when she looked at Dominic Castellano, crime lord, art collector, man trying desperately to be better than his reputation, she saw a masterpiece worth every moment of effort. 6 months ago, Marcus had abandoned her, leaving her broken and questioning her worth. Now she stood in a studio built by a man who saw her value, choosing to spend her life restoring not just art, but hope. Proving that sometimes the most beautiful transformations came from the most unlikely places. The Caravaggio hung in the Metropolitan Museum, Judith forever captured in her moment of terrible courage. But Elena's story was still being written, still unfolding in ways she never could have imagined. And this time, she wasn't just the subject of the masterpiece. She was the artist, carefully crafting a future more beautiful than anything she could have planned. One brush stroke at a time.